Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of T.N.T. Garage and Performance. And today, well, we're back on the Checker Marathon gasser build. And our big project today is taking a flat sheet, obviously bigger than this, but flat 18 gauge cold rolled steel and turning it into a rocker panel using only hand tools, lumber, and fire. So stay tuned for that and check out how we take just some regular old sheet metal and turn it into an actual usable piece of something that's strong. So just like my favorite genre of music, let's rocker and roll. No? Alright, let's get to it. Oh, hey, now, if you like content like this, builds like this, among many other things, like the video and subscribe. Let's get back into this project. We're going to do a little bit of work that's a lot of work, and you'll catch my drift in a second. This rocker on this side of the car is completely gone, so I'm going to attempt to fabricate a whole new rocker out of a flat sheet of steel I have over here. So there's a couple ways I got made up in my head on how to do the measurements so I get the proper size sheet to make all these bends, and we'll see if we can get it done. All right, as you can see, there is a big chunk missing here, and it's actually a pretty important part of the car to where it joins this door post to the front door post that also connects to the cowl, and it keeps everything square, and it's completely gone. The floor is not attached to anything right here, and neither are these two pieces. So we're going to dig in, jump over the other side, because there's more rocker there for me to make my measurements on how to form this. So we're going to jump to the other side of the car, and I'll show you kind of what I formed up in my head as a way of making a measurement of something that's this compound with curves and bends. So let's jump to the other side. Okay, well, here's my thought process on figuring out how much material I'm going to need to make this rocker. So I'm going to pick a point where there's most of the rocker there, which would be this area right here next to this little pinhole. So I got some wax paper, and I think this will definitely help me determine just how much material I need to cut. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay the material on here and tape it, and then fold it into the creases and make marks so I have a reference on how much material to cut out of my sheet. We'll get it lined up there. Make sure there we go. Now with our wax paper secure, I can go ahead and push it into the crevice, and then I'll tape the ends of it, and then I'll make my mark across the first bend. There we go. And to this side. looks like we got a pretty good form there. And it might take some adjustment till you get it perfect. We got a little sticking up here. So we'll get the rust off my tape. Just like that. There we go. A little more. There, we got our first line. And we can make my mark right there. So that'll be our first bend. And then I'm going to go ahead and kind of trace a line in this area. This will be bent later, but it'll give me a reference. Just like that. So now we're going to continue to move down the panel just like this. And I'm going to put a little tape down here, make another mark, and then we can roll it underneath and make our final marks, and that'll determine how wide of material we need. There we go. Little adjustment. There's that. And then again, we can trace it. There we go. Now the dotted lines, what I do is going to be an opposite way bend. So we got that. Now we can continue to wrap our wax paper underneath. I'm going to stabilize it a little bit here. There. There we go. And now, as far as getting underneath in our flange, I'm just going to hold it and make a mark because there's not a whole lot of flange under there. So we're just going to gently wrap it under and get it into the crevice there. Make my mark. And then a second mark. And you can see that's going to be the total length there. So again, I'll make hash marks where the other way bend's going to be, just so I have an idea. Now, I'm going to take this off, and you'll probably be amazed at just how much material you need to make a full rocker like this. So, gently peel our tape off. So now, with that pulled off from the top of our wax paper all the way down to this mark is how much material I'm gonna need as far as height-wise to make a rocker. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this over to my sheet of steel, get it laid out, and mark the overall dimensions, and we can start cutting steel out. All right, so now, we've got our template figured out here, and we're gonna need to measure just how much we need here. So we got 9 1/8 inches of material that we'll have to mark. So that'll be our initial mark is 9 1/4. So we can move this out of the way for now. I'm going to use that as a reference for bending later. So 9 1/8. We're just going to make several marks. All right. So the next thing we got to determine is just how long we need it. So I'm going to go to the panel here and measure it. Just how long I need it. All right, 72 inches. Well, now that we're back on the rocker panel build, many months later, power tour has come and gone, and I figured, got the doors on the car, and this is going to go down shortly to get the floors put in it at my buddy's fab shop, and we'll have a video on that, but we need to get this ready to shape into a rocker. You see previously that I measured it out and got it cut to roughly what it needs to be. Now, to do something like this, especially when I'm doing two bends, and I'm going to be shaping this quite a bit, I'm going to want to anneal this metal. So, what I'm going to do, go ahead, throw it up on there, and I don't have like a big oxyacetylene torch, so I had an idea, and we're going to see if it works. And that is one of these big old roofing torches with an LP tank. We'll see if we can get enough heat into this to anneal the metal. So let's get this set up. This might work. Just gonna work it back and forth. And you can kind of see when the metal starts changing. There's a light mark where the heat's going in, so we're just going to follow that down. This isn't the best way to anneal any kind of metal that you're going to work with. Oxyacetylene torch would be, preferred, to where you can soot the whole panel up with an acetylene flame and then burning it off with a clean flame, and that pretty much lets you know that you got it annealed. But what I'm doing now is I'm just following our heat line as we go down. Well, now you can see the color change in the metal is what you're really going for, is to kind of get it more of a blue color than a raw steel color like that panel up there. So this is annealed. We're going to let it cool down, and then we can start working this. And it should be easier to bend and kind of, make it go the way I want it. So give it a little bit to cool down, and we'll start bending it into a rocker panel. Well, now the next part of laying out our rockers, we need to figure out where we're going to bend it. So I'm going to measure what's left of this rocker to get our measurements, both from the bottom bend in to the pinch weld and then the length of the metal that comes down to the pinch weld, and add those two together, and that's where my first bend is going to be. So about 1 3/4 inches and 1/2 inch. So we want 2 1/4 inches to the first bend, which will lay out on our steel, which is now cooled. And now we can line it up on our makeshift buck here and pretty much make our first bend. So I'm going to grab this, I'm going to grab some gloves and a couple body hammers to help me move this along the way. Alright, got our gloves. Fit my hands in these. Yeah. Now we can grab our steel, and laying on was what I'm using as a buck, because this piece of 2x8 is about the same size as the height of the rocker. So I found this out in my yard because it's been laying there for, over a month. And my theory is, if it's here long enough and around the garage, anything becomes a tool that I can get my hands on. So we're going to use this to bend our sheet metal around and form our rockers. So let's see if I can actually get this lined up. We'll go this way so I have more room. So the big thing is starting to bend. I'm going to line up my marks with the ends of this 2x8 and then just start working it down so we can make our crease, keeping both marks lined up on the lower edge of the 2x8. So we're going to slide it over. So I'm kind of thinking as I'm doing this about what's the best way to do it. So I have thought, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to clamp this in between two pieces and bend it over. So let me grab another piece. I'm going to grab my C-clamps, and we'll get this kind of set up into a flat metal brake kind of deal and work over it. And with it clamped down, I know it won't move, and it also won't bow the rest of the metal as I work this down. There we go. We got the start of our rocker panel. And even though this is a little wavy here, that's fine. You can see we got a nice line all the way through this rocker panel. Now the hard part is going to be tipping the board up on end and getting our bend here to where it rolls in to the interior of the car. So let's see if we can't figure out a solution for that. Okay, we got her in our jig, brake, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to go through and basically do the same thing to get that shape. Start our crease and then work it down by hand, which I don't know if I've got the hook spot to do this, but yeah, what we'll do is we'll just work it over. Kind of work it down and around. There we go. Start the crease. I don't want to put a bunch of hammer dents in this, so we're gonna kind of do it manually. Keep working it down, slowly going back and forth, but you see we've got a pretty good crease down here and it looks pretty straight, so we're gonna keep at it. Well, we got our rocker panel formed for the most part. It kind of went backwards the way I wanted it, but I discovered this might actually be easier. So, as this would be the face of the rocker, and this would be the top, whereas originally this long piece would be the top, so I could form the thresholds going into the door openings. But there's such compound curves on those thresholds that's something that I'm probably going to have to do on a metal break down at my buddy's. So this actually works out. This side being shorter can slide up into the thresholds, and then all I have to do is trim this lower side and then flange it for the pinch weld. And what that does, me flipping the top and bottom, is it gives me the correct radius and angles I need, to where this will kind of tilt out a little more, and these angles will actually be a lot closer to the factory rocker. So I'm going to again take my measurements, which is 2 1/4 inches from the bend, go in, make the mark, and then we'll cut that off and make our pinch weld flange off of this side instead. And then when I make the thresholds, we can just attach it here, weld it together, so it'll essentially be a 3-piece rocker repair instead of trying to do it all out of one piece and have all the angles correct and everything like that. So I'm going to mark this, get it cut, and get our bottom flange and start fitting it to the car. So let's do that. Well, we got our rocker cut, and now it's time to bend that lower flange over. So again, got a clamp to the board, and we're just going to work it over with a body hammer. I'm going to bend both ends down so it doesn't really want to slip out of the clamp, just to make sure our measurement stays true. There we go. And now this should be pretty straightforward into working this over. As you can see, I'm making multiple passes back and forth while doing this, and that's because if you ram it home in one spot, it's going to get really wavy and out of shape all the way down. So when you're working with body hammers, just a little bit at a time, even though you can go hog wild and really send her home, just work your way down so you're not shrinking the metal in areas and getting waves in it. Also too, the motion I'm using is I'm not just hitting it straight down, I'm bringing the hammer back as I'm swinging it. So I'm not imparting all of the force of the blow straight down to the metal. It's actually bringing it back as I swing it back like that. So it's putting more into the outside and bringing it where you want it to be instead of just hitting it dead on. So that's the way I do it. See how bringing the hammer back towards me as I swing, it's laying it out much nicer than just walloping it. So we've got our rocker formed, and as I install it, you can see that it kind of wanted to twist on me, which is fine, but it's just moving it to bend. It's not actually warping the metal. So as I install it in the car, I can straighten it out and get it to where I want to be. But the critical part is that this right here is straight, and it is. I can work around the rest just from working it like this. Obviously, brought it around a little differently. So there we go. We got ourselves a flange rocker, and I'm probably going to have to take most of this flange off to get it to fit into the car where the thresholds go in. So I'm going to have a look at that, and we'll be back on getting this thing all set up. All right, well, we got our rocker trimmed to where I can meet it up with the thresholds. This part I'm going to trim up after I get it fitted. It's a little longer because I didn't cut the original line straight, so that'll get trimmed after the fact. The first thing we have to do is measure from the front fender back to this rear quarter and get that marked on here, because this actually needs to be shortened a little bit to where I can slide it on, make my marks, and cut the old rocker off. So first things first, let's get this measurement. So 69.5 inches, play it safe. We'll transfer that onto this. We want this end to be the good end, so we'll cut off the other side. Okay, now I can move you guys over here. We'll get these doors open and see what kind of mess we got. Obviously, there's nothing there, so that's why I'm replacing this whole rocker. Yeah. Come on. There we go. So, take our rocker, slide it up. I would say if we cut this at the threshold just past the bend, we'll be all right, because then it won't suck it in too much or bring it out too much. So I'm going to get the grinder in here, and we will kind of whack this out of here. I'd say that's shot. Now, let's see where we're at here. I think that'll be pretty good. Probably going to have to make a patch right here, but the first things first, we need to get this laid in. So I'm going to clean up this stuff here and get this mocked in. So let's do it. Well, as far as the threshold on that side of the car, we've got a lot of steel missing. And granted, this side's not in perfect shape, but this is salvageable right here, which also allows me to make a template of this piece here from the door hinge down to where it meets the threshold. And I'm just going to make a template out of some paper and just push it in there and get the shape I want. Make sure the paper's flat as I can get it. And we'll just make a mark around it, cut it out, and then we can transfer it to sheet metal like this. So that's It's fairly crude, but we'll trim it out with a pair of scissors and make it so it's just perfect to transfer that to some sheet metal. So let me grab my scissors. And then that'll actually make a decent template. So we can transfer this to some steel, and we can actually make 2 patch panels, 1 for each side, because, well, simply just flip it around. So let's do that. Let's get this moved over onto some steel, and let's do some more cutting, because we got to rebuild that threshold over there, really, before I do anything with the rocker, I think. All right, well, I found some spare steel from when I was doing the wheel arches, from when I sectioned the quarters, and it's already got the curve I want. So we're just going to transfer our template onto the steel. There we go. I'll just cut inside the lines. It'll be a lot smoother than my drawing there, but there's one, and I've got another piece that we can go ahead, flip our template around to the proper curve, and we can go ahead and trace it on this one as well. Well, now we got both our patch panel pieces traced out, so we're going to probably cut the driver's side one first and see how we can get it stabbed in there. So gloves and safety glasses. There we go. Let's see just how this works. That actually ought to work pretty good. So I'm going to go to the other side and actually use the radius of that threshold to shape this one. All right, we know what our radius needs to be over here because it's still intact. So we could just kind of work this in here to where it's going to conform what we need it to be over on the other side. So because it's going to have a little bit of an outward tilt to it. That's actually pretty close right there. So let's go back to the other side and see how this lays in. All right, so that actually doesn't look that bad. It looks like it'll be fairly straight pointing at this here. So next thing to do, because we know our set point is at the bottom of the hinge. So we'll cut there, mark there, and start tacking this in. And once we get it tacked into the lower part of the A pillar, we can really start to work this where it needs to go, and then make a piece that's going to go in between the two of them. So let's mark that and get to cutting. All right, well, I got my piece kind of laid out. I also laid it over my cherry picker, kind of rolled the edges over. Now it's time to clean it up. I drilled a couple holes to plug weld it to the inner structure. So we're going to clean up these edges, clean up the sheet metal on the car, and get this tacked in. All right, now it's the fun part. See if we can get her tacked in here. All right, well, we got that lightly tacked in there, right where we want it, but you can see what I'm doing here is we're making this threshold back to this point in the door. So I'm probably going to have to make a patch on this side, and then we'll make the panel in between to connect them. Now I don't know if I should wait till I get to the metal brake, because it's going to be step bend, I guess, where bends 90, and bends 90, which I think would be best to wait for the metal brake, but I can go ahead and get this kind of structurally sound, building back that lower part of the A-pillar into the door threshold and all that. So I'm going to continue on this for a little bit, do some mathing, and figure out what the next step's going to be. Well, this brings us to the end of the video. Kind of an abrupt stop to the project, because I basically ran head first into a brick wall. And it's not for any like major issue. It's just that it's going to be a lot easier when I have a metal brake at hand and things like that, so we can knock out those thresholds with the very compound bends and get them welded in all at the same time. Could I do it here? Absolutely. But the amount of time it would take for me to use hammers and dollies and all that to make all those bends, it isn't just worth the time when we can knock them out in a few minutes. And also, this rocker panel, as good as it is, isn't quite perfect, that just in the way I want it, which just isn't a complete waste of time. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, especially when you're, doing something that you don't really do all the time. The bad thing is, I'm not going to use this rocker on the car. The good news is, I inadvertently made a rocker for my Ram. So it actually follows contour perfect. So I just happened to start one project and end up finishing another one. What I'm going to do when I build the rockers is actually go with a little different plan, and I'll grab something to kind of illustrate it. So this rocker just ended up being just a touch too narrow between the bends. And could I stretch it and make it work? Yes, but it's already complete. It is what it is. So I'm essentially going to make my own press jig to make rockers. And how that's going to work is, I know a friend of mine still has some 2x3 tubing, I think, laying around, and this is going to be our die. This width is absolutely perfect for the rockers on the car. So the steel tube that'll be the length of the rocker will be our die, and I will make a frame out of 2x4s, 2x6s that's the size of the rocker, and press the tube into it to essentially stamp my own rockers, which that'll allow me to do a couple things. Repeatability, so that way I could just do both sides in half the time than it took me to make this one rocker, and two, I can also start punching them out for other guys that own checkers like this, because let's face it, new rockers for those are prohibitively expensive at $500. So if I can knock them out for half that price and get them into the hands of the other guys that are restoring these cars, that would be awesome, because I love giving back to the car community whenever I can. So in the next episode, here's what's going to happen. This is going to get trailered down to my buddy's fab shop. We're going to throw floors at it. We're going to throw threshold plates at it. We're going to fab new rockers. And that sounds like a lot of work. But with my idea on the rockers, it will be relatively quick. And with a metal brake and a bead roller on hand and a plasma cutter, it's actually going to make quite quick work of that. Especially with my buddy's brain, who I don't know how he does stuff. He just looks at things and then math flies at him and he makes it. I don't know how the hell he does it, but he's pretty good at it. So if you want to continue watching this project come along, even though I accomplished really absolutely nothing today other than showing you guys how to form sheet metal in your garage with simple tools, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, like, share. Of course, there's tons of stuff right here on YouTube for you to watch. All the builds, this build, Brute Farce, the Challenger, the Camper, the Lawnmower, the future TKZ build coming up. go ahead, check those out, comment on anything you see, and of course you can find me at T.N.T Garage and Performance on Facebook and T.N.T Garage and Performance on Instagram. So that's the end of today's project, because I really don't have time before going back to work to punch out a couple new rockers now that I have one laying aside for my Ram. So, well, until next time, remember, if it ain't broke, fix it till it is. We'll see you soon.